Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sportsbook Confidential. My name is John Sullivan, and I'm coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show here is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. And we got a real meat and potatoes episode for you today. It's March Madness, and in about a half an hour or so, a full slate of college basketball going on today. And also tomorrow, we already have the lines up for the round of 32 games. So I've got 24 college basketball games to look into. So we're going to skip the sportsbook lesson today and go right into the matchups for today and tomorrow. And that should take up the majority of our time here today. But before we do that, let us start by doing what we always do and updating my bankroll. And surprise, surprise, I had a winning week last week. I lost my hockey bet, but overall 4-2. Let's take a look here. We had the Jets money line on Friday last week, and that was a loser, minus $18. And then we had Ohio State plus 11 in the Big Ten tournament that they covered, plus $16. We had the Washington Huskies in the Pac-10 tournament last Friday. They covered. And that is plus $17. We had North Carolina versus Duke. Carolina lost by a point. Had a chance to win it at the end, but they did cover the 3, plus $17. And then we had Kansas State plus 2.5 in the Big 12 tournament. I believe they lost by 4. So that was a loser for us. And then Tennessee in the SEC tournament, and they covered handily, and that was plus $16. We had a net profit of $30, and our new bankroll is now $583. And dividing by 30, as we always do, our new bet size will be $19 going into this weekend. So nice to go back on the upswing. We can hopefully, in the next 6 months or so, hopefully move right up into positive territory as we get into football as that comes back around again. But today we're talking basketball, and we have 16 games going today. We have 8 before 7 p.m. here on the East Coast, and another 8 after 7 p.m. Or 7 p.m. and beyond, I should say, on the East Coast. And boy, some very interesting matchups today. Some of these teams I have followed and some of them not so much. I've done some precursory research on all of these games, and some of them I have strong feelings about, and others I just feel like you have to stay away from those games now. In the scheme of things here, some of these games are going to be blowouts, some are going to be very close, some may go to overtime. And then in the overtime, a team ends up winning by 10, even though they were tied at the end. So, your prognostication is certainly not an exact science. But we will talk about these games today and the 8 games tomorrow. And then I'll come up with a few picks for you. Hopefully they'll continue on my upward streak. So we'll see what happens. So these are actually listed by how soon the games go off. The first game today is Iowa versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati, 4.5-point favorite. Cincinnati, obviously, in the AAC with Houston. I feel like I'm a fan of Iowa. I feel like this game, the point spread in this game, is one to stay away from. I do feel like the Big Ten teams are overvalued right now. The mid-majors, for the most part, are undervalued. Excuse me. Cincinnati is not considered a mid-major, but they're they're not in a Power 5 conference, but they have a solid program, and this is a game of tempo. And you're going to hear me say that a lot today because you're going to have Iowa that's going to want to up the tempo, and you're going to have Cincinnati that's going to want to slow down the tempo. So that's really what it comes down to. And I think, like, if Cincinnati is able to do that, it's still going to be tough for them to cover 4.5. I really don't like that. I don't like getting, if I was getting 7, I'd be all over it. If Cincy was -1, I'd probably lean Cincy. It's just not where I want it to be. So the next game, you have two mid-level teams in their respective conferences. You have Oklahoma is in the middle of the Big 12, and Mississippi is in the middle of the SEC. And you can see that this game is lined pretty appropriately. A coin flip game, 1-point spread. I feel like Oklahoma is playing much better basketball at this time of the year than Mississippi, and I feel like the Big 12 is undervalued as a conference. I don't feel like the SEC is really overvalued or undervalued, but the stats say that Mississippi is slightly better at free throw shooting, and obviously in a very close game, you want to have the better free throw shooters because it's going to come down to that, especially if there's a high foul count in the games. But I do like Oklahoma here. I feel like the team has just taken it to another level. Obviously they were not that far above 500 for the season. Both of these teams they're a game apart. I think like 20-12 and 19-13, something like that. But Oklahoma's played better down the stretch. I like Oklahoma here. Northern Kentucky at Texas Tech. This is a game where it's a lot of points to pick the favorite. I feel like if it was 14, 15 points, Northern Kentucky would be a play here. They are a very good shooting team, an up-tempo team. The Syracuse-Baylor game was a great example last night. If a team hits over 50% of their threes, they're going to be tough to beat. Even though, Baylor did not really knock it out of the park with their free throws. But the point being is that if you have a good shooting team and they have a good shooting day, they're very tough to beat. Now, Yale yesterday shot 8 for 27 or 8 for 28 from 3, and they still only lost by 5 points yesterday to LSU. So these streaky hot teams, you have to be wary of. So I feel like that 12 number is just too big to take Texas Tech here. But they're obviously the favorite in that game. And this next game I really like. I kind of like both these teams. But Cal Irvine has 30 wins, dominated the Big West. Kansas State has really struggled down the stretch. They didn't play well in the Big 12 tournament. They're a good team. I don't think they were deserving of a 4 seed in my opinion. But Cal Irvine getting 4.5 here in this spot is very exciting to me. I feel like this game will be very close, but one team that has the potential to blow out the other is Cal Irvine. It's not the other way around. So the fact that they're getting points makes me a little tingly inside there, if you would say. Colgate versus Tennessee. We have 17.5 point spread. Tennessee is legit as a number 2 seed, taking on the 15 seed Colgate of the Patriot League. This could easily be a 20-point game. I think if you got Tennessee under 15 points, that would be a good play. Colgate doesn't have much of anything to impress me to win this game outright. It's one of those games where it comes down to, how long does the better team continue to press the underdog? Does Tennessee start to take the air out of the ball at 10 minutes? Do they wait till 5 minutes left in the game? That's really the big difference in who's going to cover the spread here. And really, really do not like that game at all. Gardner-Webb versus Virginia. Virginia, I think, is going to be on a mission in this tournament to prove, they had some tough games down the stretch. If they shoot well, their defense is good. It makes them a very tough out. 21.5 points is tough. I mean, Virginia's going to have to put up 70 to 75 points to cover that spread. Do you think they're going to hold Gardner-Webb to 40 points, or is Gardner-Webb going to score 50? So if Gardner-Webb scores 50, you're looking at Virginia to score 75. I don't think that's going to happen. Virginia scoring that many points, although I don't know. That's once again, that's 3 points in either direction makes a big difference here. Gardner-Webb getting 25 makes it a very attractive play just because Virginia tends to play lower scoring games. And that's something that, you might want to look at later on down the road. Game of interest to me, Arizona State versus Buffalo. On the narrative side, you've got Bobby Hurley playing against his old team, his first coaching gig at Buffalo, first major coaching gig. He took them to their first NCAA. Buffalo -5. Now, Buffalo is obviously 31-3. They're definitely a top 20 team. Arizona State had the play-in game against St. John's. They handled them pretty easily. This is going to be a different story. Buffalo's got 5 starting seniors. 5 is a lot of points. Buffalo tends to play up and down to their level of competition. Unless they're playing a really weak team, they don't usually blow them off the floor. I don't feel comfortable taking the -5 here, and I certainly don't want to take the +5. So, Buffalo is not a super free throw shooting team. They're like that 68-69% free throw shooting team. It's, that 5 points is a very perilous number to me. I just don't see it happening. And the last game on Friday, Oregon against Wisconsin. Wisconsin getting 2.5. I feel like this game is a big lean towards Oregon. They won the Pac-12 tournament. The Big Ten, I believe, is very overvalued in this tournament, and the NCAAs. A team is just playing well. They're playing on the West Coast. It's, everything screams take Oregon plus the points here. We'll see where that ends up, But Oregon is a team that's been inconsistent, has a lot of talent. Wisconsin's kind of played to their level. They're just, lacking 1 or 2 big playmakers, and they would be back in that upper level of college basketball like they were for so many years. But they do well with what they have. But Oregon has the potential to really just blow these guys out of the water. And the fact that they're getting points, I know it seems like a trap game, but just feel like that's a strong lean there for me. So those are the Friday games. Oh, I'm sorry, those are the early Friday games. We got to do the late Friday games. Lots and lots of basketball today. So Washington versus Utah State. This game screams stay away, stay away, stay away. Well, I'm a big fan of Washington and Mike Hopkins. He's building an excellent program there. But Utah State kind of took over the Mountain West at the end of the year. And I feel like they're a team that's playing very well. These teams match up well statistically. Obviously, the point spread is only 1 possession. So, it's kind of a pick'em game, but I cannot, in good faith, take one side over the other in that game. So here's an interesting game to me. North Dakota State versus Duke. Duke minus 26.5. Now, I have no inclination that North Dakota State is going to beat Duke. However, I do like North Dakota State to cover this game. It opened at 27. It's down to 26.5. If it went back up to 27, 28, 30, I would be all over North Dakota State. This is a team that hits threes and free throws. Overall for the season, their stats are not that great, but in the last 10 games, North Dakota State's shooting something crazy like 44% from three, and they hit their free throws. That's how you're going to beat a Duke, is to hit shots from the outside and get to the line. If you can do those two things, you are going to be very close to them. You remember, they'll show a Zion Williamson dunk 10 times, but it's still only worth 2 points. It doesn't matter if it's how hard he threw it down. It's still only worth 2 points. I've watched a lot of Duke over the last couple of weeks, and they like to keep Zion back on the baseline. They let Delorier make all the contact. That's why Delorier is always getting into foul trouble for Duke, because he is, he's the designated fouler, so to speak. So Zion stays out of foul trouble. But Jack White is out today for Duke, and there's, they're not a great outside shooting team. If you can, I've said last week, if you could pack your zone in tight on Zion and force them to shoot from the outside, just give them some wide open looks. And they're not a traditional Duke hitting 40% of their threes type of team. Now maybe they have that day, and that's a chance you take. But that's the recipe to beat Duke. And I feel, there's a prop bet out right now. Will Duke win the national championship? Yes or no? And the no is minus 600, and the yes is plus 225. I'm a big believer in the no. I feel like one of these teams is finally going to figure out how to take on Duke, and they're very beatable. It's not. I don't think they're ranked. They're that far ahead of everybody else, but they do have a pretty easy bracket as usual, in my opinion. But geez, 30 points. That's a lot. This North Dakota State team's like 19 and 15. They're not. It's just a team that plays, old school basketball and does it. If they execute well, they got a shot to stay within 30. At least that's my point of view. All right, Georgia State versus Houston minus 12. You got the Sun Belt versus the AAC. Houston lost the championship game of the AAC, but they're also 31-3, I believe, on the season. Very, very talented starting five. I don't feel like it's going to be much of a contest for Houston, but 12 is a big number to cover. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like laying 12 in that situation. Georgia State could lose this by 20. That's a game that's just tough. It's tough to put your thumbprint on, and I just want to stay away. When Houston plays an upper echelon team, if moving into the next round, then we'll see what kind of spread they get, and they may be over or undervalued. Liberty versus Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State is probably the most underrated SEC team. They did not have a good stretch run, but I feel like they can cover the 6.5 against Liberty. It's going to be one of those games where you would expect Mississippi State to slow it down a little bit, and Liberty to maybe try to up the tempo. We'll see what happens there, but I lean the SEC team here. And then we have Iona versus North Carolina, 22 points. I like North Carolina. I believe they're 10 or 11-1 to win the NCAAs right now, depending where you look. I think that's a great value. The number one seed, Iona, is one of those teams that likes to run an up-tempo game. Again, this is another team that really underperformed in the first part of the year and just kind of got it together, winning the MAAC tournament in Albany. And it's one of those games where if they can hit their shots and shoot their outside shot, I feel like North Carolina is much better at contesting a three than Duke is. But, they could keep within that 20-point range. You got to hit your free throws. As I yell at the TV often, hit your free throws. But tough number for North Carolina to cover. They could easily do it if they're inclined to flex some muscle here. I personally would stay away from that game, but you look at 25. Once you get over 25 points, you got to look at Iona there. And here's a game that really intrigues me: Central Florida versus VCU. It's a pick'em game. VCU in the A10 had a great stretch run. They did not win the conference tournament, but they have been playing very well down the stretch. Central Florida, one of those AAC teams that's just kind of middling. They have a 7'7" player, which is, kind of an oddity. But I feel like VCU is definitely the stronger of the two teams here. They've played, I believe, a tougher schedule. I believe they play a more advantageous style of basketball. They still somewhat stick to that Shaka Smart style. Central Florida, it'd be interesting to see which team, both of these teams actually, based on their average point totals, score similarly, but it'll be interesting to see which teams want to run faster or not. I like, just based on, free throw percentage and whatnot, I like VCU here based on the team stats. I feel like the A10 is a little underrated here, and I strongly lean VCU, Virginia Commonwealth. And then we have Ohio State versus Iowa State. Now, Ohio State was 11th seed. They got an at-large bid. They're like 19-14 in the regular season. I was very surprised that they got in. They were ranked in the top 25 at one point, but this is one of those bids the NCAA gives out because they know people are going to tune in to watch this team because they have such a big following. And Iowa State won the Big 12 tournament, playing very well down the stretch, really gelled in the second half of the season. I like Iowa State to cover the -5 here. I feel like this is a kind of a mismatch game. Ohio State cannot run. I don't feel like they can keep up a tempo game, so I look for Iowa State to try to push the ball a little bit here. And the numbers all say Iowa State should carry the water here, so I like the -5. And then finally we have St. Louis, who managed to win the Atlantic 10 Conference versus Virginia Tech, one of the top 4 ACC teams. Kind of a high spread for me, -10.5. St. Louis is perennially known for being a good defensive team. You're going to look for Virginia Tech to run the ball and go up-tempo as much as possible. And 10.5 is just, a lot of points. I feel like this game could be close, so I'm staying away. But that's it for Friday games. And now let's move on to Saturday as I see if I can fit everything in under the wire here. Talkie. Okay, Maryland versus LSU. Again, these are the earliest to the latest games. LSU -2.5. Maryland, again, Big Ten, I think, is overrated. They got 8 teams in the tournament, and some of them are going to throw up stinkers. And both of these teams just barely escaped with wins. I feel like LSU, even though they have an interim coach, is kind of getting it together. They have way more talent, there's no question. So they have the potential to blow out Maryland, but it's only a 3-point spread. But I do like LSU -2.5 here. Wofford versus Kentucky. Kentucky's leading scorer is out. This is why Kentucky is only -5. Don't sleep on Wofford. Wofford. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a terrier. But they are a legit team. I think they only have 3 or 4 losses on the season. It would be a big upset, but I don't know. If it got to 7 or 8, I'd definitely be on Wofford. Florida versus Michigan, -7.5. I'm all in on Michigan here, but not at that number. Florida is a well-coached team, very athletic, and they will know how to keep the game close. So 7.5 is too many points for me. I think if Michigan got down to 5 or less, I would think about taking Michigan. Always the possibility, if they're hitting their outside shot, that they could do some real damage here. But I plan on that being a close game, so I'm going to stay away. Murray State versus Florida State. What a great second-round matchup this is. Murray State's just such a great team to watch. Florida State is so athletic and has tons of size. It'll be up to see how much Terrence Mann can hit his outside shot. If Florida State has a bad shooting day, they're in trouble. 5 is a lot of points here. I feel like this is more of a 3 game. I'm still not confident to take either side. Baylor versus Gonzaga. I was watching the Baylor-Syracuse game last night, and I said to myself, neither one of these teams, at halftime it was a tie game, neither one of these teams is going to shoot this well again in the tournament, and they've got Gonzaga next. So I really like Gonzaga to win this. They're like -1,000 on the money line. I wouldn't take them straight up, but 13 points is a lot. if Baylor tries to run with them, I think they're going to lose by more than 13. So you might look at Baylor trying to make it a half-court game. That makes 13 points a lot. Don't like the spread here, but I like Gonzaga all day. We'll see. I don't think Baylor is going to shoot as well as they did last time. Minnesota versus Michigan State. Interesting that there's a Big Ten matchup in the second round. They have special rules about how they seed the teams. Minnesota played really well the other day. I feel like they could cover this spread, especially if you got to 11 or 12. I like Minnesota to stay in the game. They're going to have to hit some threes to do that. But they'll grind this game out, and I feel like they'll keep it close. I do like Minnesota in this second-round matchup. Villanova versus Purdue. You got the defending champion Villanova and the Big Ten Purdue team. Purdue getting minus 4 points. So Villanova's getting 4, and you've got a coach that's won 2 championships and has a team with a lot of championship experience getting 4 points. On paper, these teams match up very evenly. It's a coin flip based on the stats. So to me, it's very simple. You take the team with the points. I like Villanova plus 4. And then finally, we have Auburn versus Kansas. Kansas being the higher seed, but being the underdog, getting 2.5 points. Auburn won the SEC tournament. A lot of people are on them to do some damage in the tournament. Obviously they're playing very well, but they haven't really blown anybody out, tournament-wise. So, that 2.5 points is not a lot. If it got to 3.5 or 4, I would definitely be on Kansas here in the last game on Saturday. So that's going to wrap it up for our previews. And I've got picks. I got 2 Friday early, 2 Friday late, and 2 Saturday for you. If you want to follow along, if you're watching the basketball. So I've got Oklahoma plus 1 at minus 110. I talked about that game being kind of a coin flip, but Oklahoma has been playing better down the stretch. I look for them to advance today. And then Cal Irvine, a 30-win Big West team, getting 4.5 points. Such a huge they have a really good resume. I think that's a lot of points for teams that I think are very evenly matched. And then VCU versus Central Florida, Pick'em. I believe that they will carry the water here. They got a slight edge in the free throws, and the A-10 I think is a very competitive league and underrated in the tournament. Iowa State minus 5. I feel like this is a team that can really do some damage in the tournament overall. Really like their chances of covering the 5 points tonight. And then on Saturday, LSU minus 2.5 against it escapes me at the moment. But anyway, LSU minus 2.5. This team, I feel like, is starting to come together under the new coach. They've had some really close calls. They lost that game in the SEC tournament, and they're kind of on a rebound stage, I feel. I mean, that's kind of a narrative there, but they just have so much talent. If they can just avoid shooting themselves in the foot, they could easily go to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and maybe further. And then finally, Villanova plus 4. That's the game I kind of like the best out of all of these. I mean, Purdue is a legit opponent for them. The Big East, I feel like, was very tough this year, and the Big Ten was not as tough this year. But Villanova, with all their experience and their excellent coach, getting 4 points is kind of a must for me to take that play. So that is going to do it for this week's Sportsbook Confidential. Next week we'll be down to the Sweet 16, and we'll only have 4 or 6 games. So we'll get back into hockey and what else. And there's a new sports betting show on Showtime that premieres this Sunday. I'm going to have a lot to say about all the sports betting shows that are on TV right now, and maybe I'll talk about that next Friday. So enjoy the basketball, everybody. I'm going to play the outro music for you, and let's get some winners. Thanks for watching. Take care.